The airport was loud and busy. People rushed through gates, pulling heavy bags and talking on phones. Among them walked a young woman named Alina. She wore plain jeans, simple shoes, and a soft blue sweater. Her hair was tied back in a low bun. She had no fancy handbag, no gold jewelry, and no expensive perfume. Just a quiet face and kind eyes. No one noticed her. Alina didn't care. She had flown many times before. But this flight was different. This time, she chose business class, not because she wanted comfort, but because she had a reason. As she showed her boarding pass, the flight attendant looked at her with surprise. "Business class?" the woman asked. "Yes," Alina said softly. The attendant looked her up and down, then gave a fake smile. "This way," she said, but her voice was cold. Alina walked down the aisle. Her seat was near the window. She sat down quietly and placed her small bag under the seat. Other passengers started to board. Across the aisle, a well-dressed woman whispered to her husband. "Look at her clothes," she said. "Did she win a free ticket or something?" Her husband laughed. "She must be lost. Probably thought this was economy." Alina heard them. She stayed silent. A tall man in a sharp suit walked past. He stopped when he saw her. His name was Mr. Grant, a rich businessman who thought he owned the world. He stared at Alina for a moment, then raised his eyebrows. "You sure you're in the right seat?" he asked. "This is business class." Alina looked up calmly. "Yes, this is my seat." Mr. Grant chuckled. "Well, I hope they don't start letting anyone in here. Kinda ruins the view, doesn't it?" Alina looked away and said nothing. The plane was now full. The cabin crew began serving drinks. The same flight attendant came to Alina's row. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked sweetly, then turned to Mr. Grant without waiting for Alina's answer. Mr. Grant ordered a sparkling water with lemon. The attendant smiled brightly. When Alina asked for plain water, the flight attendant just nodded without eye contact, then walked away. She brought the water late, without even a napkin. The older woman sitting beside Alina leaned closer. "You handled that well, dear," she whispered. "People can be very rude when they think you're less than them." Alina gave a small smile. "It doesn't bother me much. I've seen worse." The woman smiled back kindly. "You're stronger than you look." Alina looked out the window. The plane was now in the sky, clouds floating beside them. But her mind was not on the view. She remembered something. Years ago, she had once been treated the same way at a job interview. The manager had laughed at her clothes and told her, "People like you don't lead companies." That memory burned inside her, not with anger, but with purpose. Alina had spent her whole life working hard, building her company in silence. She never showed off, never wore labels, and never told people her net worth. But today, she was on this flight for a reason. A test. Alina was not just any passenger. She was the owner of the airline. She had recently bought the company through a quiet deal. She wanted to see how her staff treated ordinary-looking people, and now she had seen enough. Still, she said nothing. Mr. Grant leaned back in his chair. "I wonder what rich people think when they see someone like you up here," he said loud enough for others to hear. "Must be a glitch in the system." The couple across the aisle giggled. Alina turned her head slowly and looked at him. Her voice was calm. "Sometimes it's not the system that's broken. Sometimes it's people's eyes." Mr. Grant raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." But Alina simply returned to looking out the window, her face peaceful. Inside, she was not angry. She was ready. This flight would be remembered, not because of the food, the seats, or the view, but because of a lesson. A quiet passenger was about to teach the loud ones who she truly was. As the plane flew smoothly through the sky, Alina closed her eyes. The loud voices around her faded. The rude comments, the fake smiles from the flight staff, Mr. Grant's arrogance, it all became quiet in her mind. She remembered where she came from. 10 years ago. Alina was only 19. She worked at a small diner in the mornings, and at night she cleaned offices. Her mother was sick, and her father had passed away when she was just a child. Money was always a problem. She didn't wear new clothes. She couldn't afford fancy food. But she had one thing no one could take away: her dreams. During breaks, she studied business books. At night, she watched videos about company owners, airlines, and how to invest. While others went to parties, Alina stayed up working and learning. Her friends left her. They said, "You're wasting your youth." But Alina smiled and said, "I'm building my future." The first big step. When she turned 21, Alina used the little money she had saved to start a small online travel service. She worked from a second-hand laptop in a tiny room. No help, no fancy office. At first, nobody trusted her company. They said, "Who is this poor girl trying to start a business? She won't last 6 months." Alina worked harder. She answered every customer call herself. She fixed problems personally. She stayed honest, even when things got hard. People slowly began to notice. Her reviews were good. Travelers started booking with her. Her small company started to grow. She didn't buy a car or clothes. She reinvested every rupee. She kept her life simple, but her dreams kept getting bigger. The betrayal. At age 24, Alina finally got an offer. A business investor promised to take her company to the next level. He smiled at her, spoke gently, promised support. But after 1 year, he tricked her into signing a contract that took her company away from her. She lost everything. She cried for 2 days. Then she stood up and said, "They took my business, not my brain." Alina started again. She didn't complain. She didn't fight online. She disappeared and quietly built something better. This time, she built a software company for airline ticket systems. Airlines across the world began to use her tools. At 28, she bought shares in multiple travel companies. And just 1 month ago, she bought full ownership of the very airline she was now flying on. But no one on the flight knew. To them, she was still just a girl in simple clothes. Back to the plane. Alina opened her eyes. The plane was still flying. The clouds were orange now, touched by the sunset. She looked around. Mr. Grant was laughing loudly about small business owners. The couple across the aisle were sipping wine, still whispering rude comments. The flight staff passed her without eye contact. She didn't feel angry. She felt clear. This was exactly what she came to see. Not just how they treated her, but how they treated anyone who didn't look rich. Beside her, the older woman leaned closer again. "You remind me of someone," she said. "My daughter was just like you. Quiet, hardworking, and brave." Alina smiled softly. "You must be proud." The woman nodded with tears in her eyes. "I lost her in an accident, but she wanted to fly planes. She loved the sky." Alina's eyes softened. "Then she's flying with us now." They both looked out the window. A flight attendant came by with a tray of snacks. She placed them in front of Mr. Grant and the other passengers, but skipped Alina's row. Alina smiled to herself. It didn't matter. She had tasted hunger before. She had known pain deeper than this. These small insults were nothing to her now. She was here for something bigger. She looked down at the small gold pen in her bag. On it was written, Alina M., founder and CEO. But no one had seen it yet. Soon they would. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with truth. And when they found out who she really was, they would remember this flight for the rest of their lives. The plane moved steadily through the sky, but inside the cabin, something was off. Alina, still seated quietly by the window, felt it in the air, the way people looked at her, talked around her, and treated her like she didn't belong. She didn't need to pretend anymore. They had already shown their true colors. The businessman, Mr. Grant, leaned back in his seat, still talking loudly as if the plane was his living room. "I mean, look around," he said, pointing slightly in Alina's direction. "Standards are dropping. Anyone can sit here now. Makes you wonder what business class is even worth anymore. The couple across the aisle giggled again. The man said, I wouldn't be surprised if she snuck in. Alina kept her eyes on the clouds. Ignored again. When the attendants began serving lunch, they skipped Alina's row at first. She waited patiently. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Finally, she raised her hand gently. Excuse me, she said. One of the flight attendants stopped, barely hiding her annoyance. Yes, she said, sharply. I haven't received lunch yet, Alina said calmly. The attendant blinked. Oh, let me check, she muttered and walked away without apology. Mr. Grant turned toward her. If you can't afford food, I can buy you a sandwich, he said with a smirk. Alina looked at him. No need. I've already paid for more than just lunch. He laughed. Oh really? What exactly do you do? Before Alina could answer, the flight attendant returned and placed a cold meal tray in front of her without a word. No napkin, no drink. Alina looked at the food quietly. It wasn't the meal that bothered her. It was the message. The juice incident. Suddenly, a child from another row ran down the aisle, holding a juice box. He tripped slightly and the juice spilled all over Alina's lap. Her sweater and pants were soaked. The child gasped. I'm sorry, he said, scared. Alina smiled gently. It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen. But the child's mother rushed over and gave Alina a sharp look. You should have moved your legs, she snapped. He's just a child. I didn't see him coming, Alina said kindly. It's fine. Mr. Grant chuckled again. Now she's getting bathed in orange juice. Unbelievable. The flight attendants brought paper towels, but handed them to the child's mother instead of Alina. No one offered her help. Alina used her own tissues to clean her seat. The older woman beside her shook her head. What is wrong with these people? She whispered. Alina replied softly. They only see what they want to see. A cruel offer. About 30 minutes before landing, Mr. Grant stood up and turned to Alina with a grin. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp bill. Here, he said, holding out some cash. Why don't you take this and move to the back? You'll be more comfortable in economy. Some nearby passengers chuckled. The flight attendant standing nearby didn't stop him. She smirked too. Alina looked at the money in his hand. Then she looked into his eyes. And she smiled. Sure, she said, reaching out and taking the cash. Mr. Grant blinked, surprised. You're actually taking it. Alina folded the note neatly and placed it in her bag. I'll use it to improve my airline, she said simply. The laughter around her grew. Your airline, Mr. Grant said loudly. You mean the one you're lucky to fly on? Alina didn't reply. She just sat still, calm and quiet, as if she knew something they didn't. And she did. Because at that very moment, in the cockpit, the co-pilot was reading an urgent email. Something big was coming. The email came from the airline's headquarters. It said, Important. CEO Alina M. is on board today's Flight 827 in business class. Please notify the in-flight manager immediately. The co-pilot's eyes widened. He rushed out of the cockpit and whispered to the flight manager. The manager's face turned pale. She looked up toward the rows where Alina was seated and suddenly realized the mistake. All this time, they had ignored her, laughed at her, mocked her. And now they were realizing who she truly was. The owner of the airline. The calm before the reveal. Back in her seat, Alina gently closed her bag and looked out the window again. She had enough proof now. She had seen the truth with her own eyes. Not everyone who looks rich deserves respect. And not everyone who looks ordinary is nobody. Some people wear power quietly. Some people own the sky and let others laugh while they wait. And soon, their laughter would stop. The plane began its descent. The captain's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin landing shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." People adjusted their chairs and gathered their things, but the mood in the front cabin had already started to change, quietly, nervously. Something had shifted. The flight manager walked quickly toward business class, holding her tablet tightly. Her eyes scanned the rows until they landed on Alina. Her heart dropped. This quiet woman, this passenger they ignored, was the CEO. The manager's hands trembled slightly. She whispered something to the nearest flight attendant and walked over. A sudden apology. "Miss, Ms. Alina," the manager said, trying to smile. "We just received confirmation from headquarters. We had no idea you were on board." Alina turned to her slowly, her face calm. "Is that so?" she asked softly. "Yes, ma'am," the manager stammered. "Please accept our deepest apologies for how you've been treated. If there's anything we can do, anything at all." The flight attendants behind her suddenly looked alert, polite, respectful. Their fake smiles were now nervous ones. Passengers nearby turned their heads. Whispers began. "Wait, what did she call her? Did she say CEO?" Mr. Grant frowned. "What's going on?" The flight manager tried to explain. "Sir, this passenger is not just a guest. She's the owner of the airline, Ms. Alina N.M." A cold silence fell over the entire business class section. Faces turned pale. Mr. Grant's smirk disappeared. He looked at Alina with wide eyes. "Wait, that's not possible. She can't be the owner. She's just..." He stopped himself. The words, "just a girl, just a poor traveler, just nobody," they were all stuck in his throat. Alina finally turned to face him, slowly and gracefully. "You gave me money," she said. "You told me to sit in economy. You laughed at me, spilled jokes, and judged me for my clothes." Mr. Grant looked down, silent. The couple across the aisle shrank back in their seats. The older woman beside Alina whispered, "I knew you were someone special. I could feel it." Alina smiled gently. "You were kind. That was more than enough." A lesson begins. The flight manager began offering fancy snacks, fresh juice, and warm towels to Alina. But she raised her hand to stop her. "No need," Alina said. "I didn't come here for service. I came to observe." The passengers listened quietly, shame filling the air. "I built this airline from nothing," Alina said, her voice still soft but clear. "I came here today not to be seen, but to see." The manager lowered her head. "We are truly sorry, ma'am. The staff will be spoken to immediately." Alina nodded. "It's not just about staff. It's about people." She turned to Mr. Grant. "You wear a suit and call yourself successful, but real success doesn't treat others like dirt." He swallowed hard. "I've been poor," Alina continued. "I've cleaned floors, served tables, and walked miles to chase my dreams. People like you laughed then, too. But today," she said, reaching into her bag and pulling out her gold pen, "I own the very sky you thought I didn't belong in." Landing with meaning. The plane touched down. As the wheels hit the runway, no one clapped, no one cheered. They were all too busy thinking. The sane woman they mocked, ignored, and insulted was now the most powerful person on the plane. As they rolled toward the terminal, Mr. Grant stood up and turned toward Alina. I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't know." Alina looked at him. "But you didn't try to know," she replied. "You saw clothes, not character. A seat, not a soul." He nodded, ashamed. The couple beside him didn't even look up. A message for all. As the door opened and passengers prepared to leave, Alina stood up last. She turned to the flight attendants, the passengers, and the manager. "I won't fire anyone today," she said, "but I will make changes. Not for me," she added, "but for the next person who walks in wearing simple clothes, who might not own an airline, but still deserves respect." The staff nodded, eyes down. The older woman gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You've changed something today." Elena smiled. Sometimes the biggest lessons fly quietly. The airport lights were bright as passengers walked off the plane. People whispered and stared at Elena as she calmly walked through the terminal. Some still couldn't believe what had just happened. The woman they had mocked and ignored was the billionaire owner of the airline. The manager's panic. Inside the airline's VIP office, the flight manager stood by her phone, sweating. She had already reported everything to the head office. Everyone there was shocked. "She was on board, and you didn't recognize her?" they asked. The manager nodded, ashamed. She didn't look like a billionaire. And that was the problem. They had judged her by appearance, not by who she was. Now the story was spreading. The leak. That night, someone on the plane, most likely a staff member, posted a photo online. It showed Elena sitting in business class, looking out the window with the caption, "She was treated like nobody." Turns out, she owns the whole airline. Within hours, it went viral. People shared their own experiences of being judged, mistreated, or ignored for looking poor. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines read, "Billionaire Elena M. flies in silence, teaches everyone a lesson in humility." "Don't judge a book by its cover." Airline owner insulted by her own staff. Reactions everywhere. The world responded. People praised Elena for her calmness, for not shouting, not showing off, not using power to hurt, but instead using it to teach. Even celebrities tweeted about it. One post read, "This woman is a queen. Humble, powerful, real." Her name trended globally. Back at home, Elena sat in her quiet living room the next evening. No gold furniture, no giant mansion, just a soft couch, warm tea, and a small dog curled up beside her. She wasn't watching the news. She was reading letters, hundreds of them, emails, messages, notes from strangers who said things like, "You gave me hope. I've been treated like that too. Thank you for standing strong. I want to build my life like you did." Tears welled in her eyes. She hadn't planned for the world to see what happened, but maybe it needed to be seen. A surprise visit. The doorbell rang. Elena opened it to find a group of reporters outside. One of them stepped forward kindly. "We're sorry to bother you," she said, "but the world wants to know. How did it feel, being treated that way on your own plane?" Elena thought for a moment, then replied, "It felt familiar." The reporters looked confused. "I grew up being looked down on," she explained. "So this wasn't new. But it reminded me that too many people still treat others based on what they wear or how they look." One reporter asked, "Will there be consequences?" "Yes," Elena said calmly, "but not out of anger, out of learning. I don't want revenge. I want change." A public message. The next morning, Elena released a short video online. She stood in a simple white blouse. No makeup, no jewelry. She looked into the camera and spoke gently. "To everyone who has ever been ignored, judged, or mistreated, this story is not just about me. It's about all of us. You don't have to be rich to deserve respect. You don't have to look important to be important. Kindness should be given freely, not based on someone's clothes, skin, or seat number. Let this flight be a lesson, not just for airlines, but for the world." She ended the message with a soft smile and walked away. Ripples of change. The video reached millions. Other airline CEOs commented on it. One promised to start humility training for staff. Another offered free upgrades for low-income travelers. People began sharing their own quiet acts of kindness. Helping someone with bags, standing up for a stranger, smiling at someone who looked tired. Elena had started something much bigger than a viral post. She had started a shift in how people thought. Back to the sky. A week later, Elena boarded another flight. This time, she flew under her real name, but quietly, again in business class. This time, everything was different. The staff greeted her kindly. but not out of fear. The passengers were polite, not fake. The little things mattered now. The older woman sitting beside her smiled and said, "Are you?" Elena nodded. "Yes." The woman chuckled. "Well, you've made flying better. For all of us." Elena looked out the window at the clouds once more. She wasn't looking for power. She was looking for change. And she had found it, in the hearts of everyday people. 1 week had passed since the world learned about Elena, the humble billionaire who flew in silence. The story still trended online. News outlets kept talking about her, and airlines around the world were reviewing their training programs. But not everyone was celebrating. Mr. Grant, the rich businessman who had mocked Elena on the plane, couldn't stop thinking about what happened. A heavy heart. Mr. Grant sat in his office, staring at the same expensive watch he had proudly shown off on the flight. But today, it felt different. It didn't shine the same way. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his assistant. "You've been removed from the next airline event." The CEO herself requested it. Mr. Grant's chest tightened. He had built his image around wealth, success, and respect. But now, people were whispering behind his back. "That's the guy who insulted the CEO." He sighed and leaned back. For the first time in years, he felt small. The letter. Later that evening, a delivery boy arrived with a handwritten note. It had no logo, no official stamp, just a plain white envelope. Inside was a simple message. "You don't need to be perfect, but you need to grow. Elena M." Mr. Grant read it twice. There was no threat, no anger, just truth. The other side. At the same time, the flight attendant who had ignored Elena also sat alone in her small apartment. Her name was Tina. She had been suspended after the story broke. Everywhere she went, she felt judged. One woman at the grocery store had whispered, "That's her, the rude one from the viral flight." Tina's hands shook as she read through online comments. She should be fired. No kindness, no class. Why do people like her get to wear a uniform? Tears streamed down her face. She hadn't meant to be cruel. She was tired, stressed, under pressure. But that didn't excuse her actions. A knock at the door. The next morning, Tina heard a knock. When she opened the door, a woman stood there, calm, smiling gently. It was Elena. Tina froze. "May I come in?" Elena asked softly. Tina nodded, too shocked to speak. They sat at the kitchen table. A long silence followed. Then Tina whispered, "I'm sorry. I judged you. I treated you like nothing." Elena nodded slowly. "I know. But now, I want to see who you really are, without the uniform, without the stress." Tina wiped her tears. "I'm just someone who messed up." Elena reached into her bag and handed Tina a small card. "Second Chances Training Program. For those willing to learn, grow, and change. You can join this," Elena said. "Not because I forgive you, but because I believe in what comes next." Tina broke down crying. The change begins. Across the country, Elena's new program launched quietly. It was simple. No one would be fired instantly. Everyone who had mistreated her was offered a chance to learn. The focus was on kindness, respect, and humility. Reporters were shocked. "Why are you being so gentle?" they asked her. Elena answered, "Because if we respond to hate with hate, we don't change anything. But if we give people a chance to see their own reflection, maybe they'll start to care." Mr. Grant returns. One day, Elena held a private workshop. To her surprise, Mr. Grant walked in. He wore no suit, no watch, no loud voice, just quiet eyes. "I came to say thank you," he said, "for not destroying me." Elena nodded. It was never about revenge. He looked down. "I lost some business deals after what happened. I deserve that. But I also lost something bigger, my pride. And maybe," he added, "that's a good thing." Elena handed him a booklet. Respect begins where ego ends. Flying again. Weeks later, Tana returned to the skies, not in her old role, but as a mentor for new crew members. She walked down the aisle, helping a young trainee serve passengers with care. Always smile, she told her. Even if someone looks simple, you never know who they are or what they've been through. Alina watched from a distance, proud. The same sky that once held cold silence now held hope. A quiet legacy. Alina didn't need trophies or applause. She only needed change. And that was happening, not just in her airline, but across cities, homes, and hearts. People were thinking twice before judging. They were choosing kindness over pride. And Alina, she was still flying, still watching, still believing in people, even the broken ones, because everyone deserves a second chance if they are willing to take it. Months had passed since the flight that changed everything. Alina, the woman once treated like nobody, had become a symbol around the world. Not for her money, not for her power, but for her kindness, her humility, and her quiet strength. People now called her by a new name, the Quiet Queen. But Alina never wanted a crown. She only wanted change. The world reacts. From small towns to big cities, people were still talking about her. Schools taught her story to children. News anchors shared updates on her programs. Airline companies copied her training systems. But the most powerful change, it was happening in everyday hearts. Strangers began smiling at one another. Passengers started saying, please, and thank you. People thought twice before judging someone by their clothes or seat number. One man even wrote online, I used to ignore the cleaner in my office. After hearing Alina's story, I brought him coffee and thanked him. He cried. That moment changed my life. The hidden queen. Alina didn't appear on TV. She refused interviews. She turned down magazine covers and fame. Instead, she flew quietly, still in simple clothes, still in economy class at times. Not to test people, but to stay connected with the real world. She believed something deeply. Power doesn't live in titles. It lives in actions. A special visit. One morning, Alina received a letter, not from a CEO or politician, but from a little girl. It read, Dear Miss Alina, my classmates laughed at my old shoes, but when the teacher told your story, they stopped. Now they want to be kind like you. Thank you for showing the world that being good is better than being rich. Alina smiled as tears filled her eyes. She folded the letter gently and placed it in her drawer, right beside her first job uniform from when she cleaned hotel rooms. She never wanted to forget where she came from. Final flight. Alina decided to take one more unannounced flight. No bodyguards, no special seat, just her and her memories. This time, the flight crew smiled warmly, not because they recognized her, but because kindness had become part of their hearts. The flight was peaceful. Near the end, a young boy dropped his juice. The man beside him, wearing a sharp suit, gently cleaned it with napkins and smiled. Accidents happen, he said softly. Alina saw it all. And that's when she knew. The world had listened. Back on the ground. When the flight landed, a reporter at the gate spotted her. He walked up, microphone ready. Ms. Alina, he asked, after everything, what do you want people to remember about you? She paused, then said, that I walked quietly, but left footprints of kindness. That I never shouted, but still changed the way people think. That you don't have to be loud to be strong. The reporter lowered his microphone slowly, speechless, and Alina walked away, just as she always did. Humbly. Legacy in the sky. Years later, a new airline launched a plane with a special name printed on its side. The Alina M, Queen of the Sky. Not to praise her money, but to honor her message. Every time that plane flew, passengers were reminded. Treat everyone with respect, because you never know who they truly are. the final words. In her last public letter, Alina wrote, "Kindness is a choice. So is silence. But never let silence become cruelty. Speak with love, walk with respect, and fly with grace. Alina M." The story ends, but the lesson lives on. Alina may have never worn a crown. She never shouted for attention. She never demanded to be treated like royalty. But in a world full of noise, her quiet grace spoke the loudest. She didn't rule from a throne. She ruled from the heart. And that is why the world will never forget the quiet queen who changed the sky.